Yeah, you also learn the nuances, which I think is important. It's kind of like being a sales rep and then getting promoted. Like you understand the job, and if you don't, it's hard to back into it because you don't know
Right?
those lonely drives on a Tuesday evening to make that last call when you want to be home, right? You,
Seriously, yeah. If
if
you
you've
haven't
done it,
lived that life, then it's hard to it's hard to I mean it's hard to lead a function you haven't been
yeah,
in. You've come up within the ranks. You've been
yeah,
promoted from rep to manager or leader, and you've come in new as a leader where you've inherited an organization as well, right?
yeah, both, and multiple times.
Mm.
Also starting in mid-tier management and moving to like,
A senior.
VP or senior management
So
level
now
is
you're
different.
managing managers. That's a yes, another whole another
Yeah, like
dynamic.
that's a big jump that I think it's overlooked. Going from the field to your first management job or field to manager and group and a team
Right.
it's a huge leap, and it takes a whole skill set. And then going from like managing the individual contributor to managing managers or higher, like that becomes a different transition level,
Mm.
and it different level of delegation and confidence and patience and all those things, and it comes with time. And that's where you asked me about imposter, or we talked about a little bit of imposter syndrome. Like that can creep in pretty quickly when you start working with a lot of really smart,
Senior level.
high achieving people that had already
Yeah.
done the thing that you were kind of separating yourself from the herd. And now everybody you're around has already done that too, and now you're trying to
You're
go
not
up.
special anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Now it's like prove yourself all over again. How can you stand out amongst a set of other A players? It's going
Yeah,
to the
right.
being on the
Right.
U.S. Olympic team. You're not. We all are MVPs, but what are you gonna do, right?
Well, you want to
That's
be there. That's the whole
oh for
point. You
sure,
want, you
for
want to
sure.
be there because that's how you bring out your best. Like when you're around a lot of really good people, hopefully more talented than you, that's when you become better. If you're open to it, that's when you grow
For
because
sure.
they're pushing you. So
Tell me about your current situation a little bit. So let's set the stage for the audience in terms of what you're doing today, and we'll work backwards from there. I understand that you've been at Providence Medical Technology about 5 years. What does Providence Medical Technology even do? Can you kind of break that down? I know we're in the med device space, but can you elaborate? I'm sure you can.
absolutely, yeah. So we're a med device company. We specialize in treatments of the spine. So specifically, cervical spine disease has been where our bread and butter has been for the last really 10 years. We have a flagship product called Chorus, which allows orthopedic and neurospine surgeons to perform a posterior cervical fusion through a tissue sparing approach, which it's one of a kind. There's nothing else like it on the market. With that, we have a platform of other products that support that procedure and other innovations that actually can be used throughout the spine. But we are focused on the treatment of spine diseases, spine disorders, and we solely focus on um, manufacturing, marketing, and promoting and educating orthopedic and neurospine surgeons. And then obviously they're working at sites of service like hospitals, surgical centers, ASCs. So and we're a global entity. We sell in multiple countries. 99% of our business is here domestically. I've been with Providence for over 5 years as senior vice president of global sales. So my job is to build out the sales function, our commercial channel. I work very closely with our market access team, which includes marketing and clinical as well as
Mm.
ops, to ensure that we're manufacturing great products that are safe and high quality, but also we're getting the word out. And my primary objective with our sales leadership team is to find the best talent in the market, bring them into the organization in strategic markets, and make sure that we're educating and letting the surgeon community know that this technology is available for their patients, because it's really a game changer and very, very powerful, efficacious technology that can help patient outcomes. So it's exciting work, love it, and it's been a great ride so far.
Yeah, I mean you're impacting lives in a real way. It's important that cybersecurity is important, and lots of different softwares that we work with are important, but you are directly, like literally touching the human and improving their quality of life. I myself have had an ACDF 3 level. I worked at Providence for a couple of years. And when you're in the spine space, it's not actually, I never met with anybody in the industry that actually had a procedure done on themselves. But one of the things I know that's really unique and special about being in that space is we have to learn how to do this procedure ourselves. So we're practicing on cadavers. Your team is in the lab, in the OR, doing this procedure hands-on and learning what that looks like with, obviously not real humans, but to that point, they're in the OR. The transaction happens in the OR with your business. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. And you're right. We spend a lot of time training our reps and working hand in hand with our healthcare professional faculty. So we have surgeons that help train.
Mm,
But our team becomes an integral part of making sure that procedure goes off really well. So we spend a lot of time making sure that our reps are well equipped, well trained, and have the experience to bring a lot of value to our surgeon customers at the end of the day, because it's really about patient safety and driving really the optimal outcome for the patient. And
right.
that's it's really important to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's changed my life having I had the interior version, but you specialize in a posterior, just so we're all clear for our audience. Folks like Tiger Woods, Peyton Manning, George Clooney, Jennifer Grey, all of these folks have had either lumbar or cervical fusion surgeries done. So it's we all have spines, people, and we all know what it's like to have neck and back pain, I'm sure. So definitely check out Providence. Now, a little bit about your organizational structure. Can you break down? You did mention you're global, so we know that there's that aspect of the business. But how many direct reps do you have? I know you have an indirect channel. So about how many distributors are you working with today?
Yeah, so I think our direct channel is 25 or so reps and a field management team. So there's probably 30 of us that are directly, working out in the marketplace here domestically. And then our distribution partner it's pretty expansive. I would say it's in around 100 different distributors,
Wow.
domestically and internationally.
So talk to us about how the differences in managing those. From your seat, you have responsibility over both routes to market, both direct and indirect. So I will talk a little bit about your leadership style and those sorts of things, so we can maybe unpack what you're doing with your direct team there. But what are you doing to get your indirect channel sort of hopping? Because that's something that I think a lot of companies, irrespective of industry, are trying to crack the code on. How do we get these referral sources, these indirect models, partner-led models thriving? It's a difficult racket. So how is your team successful at that?
We're really fortunate to have some long-term distribution partners, and they are distributor partners because we treat them as we would a direct, and that we really value their contributions. They've got really ingrained long-term relationships in their specific market. Some of the
Mm,
distributors we work with maybe work with one or two surgeons. Some work with 100 surgeons in a given market. So really depends on the size. There's a lot of nuance to distributor partners, but they're running independent businesses. They carry usually
multiple
multiple
products.
product lines, not just
Mm,
ours, but the partners we tend to work with are typically very focused on spine, bringing new technology to their customers. And I think a lot of the success, at least we've had, and also I've had at other companies, is that we treat them with respect. We give them the resources that they need, and also understanding that they're not a direct employee. So there's certain things that we're may ask of a direct employee that we wouldn't ask of a distributor partner. But again, we really value the partnership. We need to be available,
right.
accessible, and very resource oriented, because again, they're doing a lot of things. They're focused on a lot of different products. We want to keep our product front and center in their mind,
Right.
obviously. So high level of engagement. We actually have a dedicated team that works with our distribution network. So a leader that is available to work closely with them, and then we call them customer development managers, but
Okay.
personnel that are there to help cover cases, do training, work with certain customers that may have individual needs that maybe the distribution partner isn't able to provide solutions for right away. So the more we can resource their efforts, the more successful they are, the more they want to sell our products, and And we also don't we don't take a shotgun approach. We're more of a sniper, I would say, where we've got a
Mm,
specific market or a specific pocket we want to get into. That's who we're targeting, the surgeons and the distributor partners that are working with those surgeons in that market. So very specific, not a scattered approach. So we've actually trimmed our network down over the past couple of years,
wow.
especially with the pandemic, and we've become more streamlined and again focused on trying to provide really good support and resource for the partners that we work with.
I love how you have an inclusive approach to the partner program. I believe you invite them to your SKOs and other events that Providence is hosting. Is that right?
Yeah, we try to, and in fact, this year because we're coming out of the pandemic, really talking about some other options where we do distributor trainings and other meetings that we can bring some of our higher volume groups together, come down to the home office in Pleasanton, or go to them and do regional things. We also use platforms like Zoom and Google Meet to
Of
do
course.
training
Right.
and connect that way. So yeah, I think a broad brush of that, but I think it's an area we want to get a little bit more engagement in 2023.
Fair
Last
enough.
couple of years has just been a little more challenging.
Well, I think there's a lot that can be taken away. We could probably unpack that topic all day. I do want to understand your path a little bit, though. So before you got into spine, you were at Medtronic, Cardinal Health. I mean, these are multi-billion dollar organizations, and they're leading in that space. I want to understand your time at Medtronic specifically. It looks like you were there during an acquisition. Um, that can be tough, and I think we're going to see a lot of consolidation in a lot of different industries this year. So, what advice do you have, and what was it like to sell through an acquisition like that? That transition of being with, I think it was Salient, and then graduating into a bigger organization like Medtronic. There's a lot of distraction happening at the time. So, how are you able to continue to lead effectively and still hit your targets with all of that going on around you? People are probably going to see some of that this year in other industries.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I agree with you. When I think back to those years, one, I mean, it was transformative for me. So that Salient, it was actually Tissue Link became Salient, became acquired by Medtronic. Those are really important years for me from a
Mm,
career development standpoint. If I think back, I started as a field rep, one of the first reps in Florida for Tissue Link at the time. We had this great technology, real game changer. So we knew that it had a bright future,
mm.
and that kind of run over the next 6 years was just 30% growth every quarter. And we're just growing and expanding, growing and expanding. And I was fortunate to get an opportunity to go from field rep to, regional manager, I think was the title, but I was managing direct reps out on the West Coast. And we did really well. And then eventually I was promoted to an area vice president. And that was in and around the time of the transaction. And your point and your question is well taken in that there was a lot of distraction because there's a lot of ambiguity. Nobody knows what the
Mm.
future holds. I give a ton of credit to our senior leadership, our CEO at the time, and down that chain of command because they kept us informed, but not overly informed. In that, at my level, I kind of knew things were happening. There was diligence going on. There was information they may need. There was transparency to the fact that, hey, there could be a transaction. We could do an IPO. Something's happening. We're a very successful business, and we're kind of primed for that next, move in the future. So what was challenging, to your point, was to keep the field rep focused on what we needed to do. And it came down to day-to-day execution. It was
Got
just
it.
like, we can't control anything that's a month from now. We can't control a quarter from now. We don't know if it's Medtronic or Stryker or who's acquiring us, but we know that if we have a very healthy business, you're doing your job really, really well. That's valuable. And whoever acquires us, or if you go IPO, you're of great value, especially at the territory manager or right at the point of attack.
Right. I mean,
So
anybody close to the customer in those situations usually isn't a good spot, particularly if they're performing
yeah,
well.
absolutely. And we felt that way the whole way up the chain of command. And
Mhm.
funny, as you fast forward, like Medtronic acquired us and they brought the entire division over. There was no layoffs.
Oh, nice.
They
Very nice.
just brought us in as our own entity and we became Medtronic Advanced Energy. And that business ran for, I want to say 10, 12 years. as a standalone
Oh,
business
got it. So they
under
didn't force the
Medtronic.
integration right away. So you were running your own CRM still just focused on your products. It wasn't like they, okay, now you are selling Medtronic's book and you're
Yeah.
also double dipping into our CRM and making sure all the data is flowing. Okay, that makes it for
Yeah.
less distraction.
Yeah, it was. And there still was distraction. There's still
Of course.
changes. And I want to say stayed along with Medtronic for a year or
Hmm.
so. But really liked that earlier stage environment and just felt like that, that fit my goals and aspirations a little bit better at the time. So, I transitioned away, but the actual transition was pretty smooth, all things considered.
Good to know. Yeah, there's not everyone has gone through these types of transactions, and it can be nerve-wracking. You're not sure if your job is safe, what tomorrow holds, what's going to change, even if you do have your job. And sometimes there is a lot of disruption. Sometimes you change teams and products and focuses, and I think it's important to move with the cheese, as they say. I'm sure we've all read Spencer, that book, and that's particularly important at that time. Now, go to Cardinal Health for me. That's that was a different time for you. I think you spent a considerable amount of time as an individual contributor as well there, and where you probably were was really formative, I would presume, in terms of your sales approach and whatnot. But you were selling a really interesting product there. You were selling sales effectively. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it started out actually it was pharmaceutical sales. It was at the core of it when I was an
Hmm.
individual contributor. But the division I was in for Cardinal was building custom sales forces for mostly pharma or biotech, maybe
Startups,
medical,
right? Hmm.
earlier stage, had a new product, wanted to expand, but didn't want to commit to a full, the capital that you need to go full line. And it was a great business model. And I did start as an individual contributor, basically a pharma rep for 3 years, and then got into management and was able to see that other side of the business, which was really neat. So I got to hire sales teams and manage them up and do transactions. And so for about 3 years, I was a real young manager, but it was definitely eye-opening. It was a great experience learning how to build teams quickly, launch products, train, performance manage, and then
Mm.
transition, because you got to go on. We were constantly in kind of movement, and it was the word flexibility is what comes to mind, right? It was all about being flexible, being on your toes. You know, today doesn't determine tomorrow by any means.
Mm.
Comp plans, you name it, everything was in movement, in flux. And if that wasn't the environment that you felt comfortable in, it was not the place for you. So that taught me a lot about how to kind of just stay really alert to what was happening, be able to change quickly and find others that want to do that. And those that don't, not a great place. And that's okay, because not
Yeah.
everybody wants to be in that environment. But yeah, it was a really nice run with Cardinal. And I learned a lot, some great people there. And it was definitely impactful.
And that was your first shot into leadership. Was then. So this is right around 2004. You were leading 12 reps in the Southeast. So if we do the math, you've been leading salespeople specifically for nearly 20 years. That's a long track record. And you've been at, like we said, Providence as the global head of sales for over 5 years. You have
Yeah, Derek, I'm getting old. Thank you for
no,
pointing
yeah,
that out. I
that's
am
where I was going with
50.
that. That's, um, but no, I mean, look, you've established yourself with a really strong track record in sales leadership. I'm curious how the hell you do it though, because to sustain that long consistently, and these days you often see uh, individuals in a role like yours that are moving every couple of years, and you're able to hold it down everywhere you go. People love working for you. I know for a fact. I have a very good friend, John DeLeon, who I know is going to listen to this episode, who works in your leadership, and it's like rep of the year 2 times in a row or something. So what you're doing is working. You have the proven track record, but give us the secret sauce though. What is the one or two things that you would attribute that phenomenal track record to?
Uh, Very good luck. Very good luck. John
Mm.
DeLeon's a good example of that. That's somebody that's just super talented, and you just put him in the right place at the right time. Good things are going to happen. No, I appreciate that, and it is it's it's pretty amazing when you look back. And the one thing I'd say is, in terms of, I don't know what the special sauce is, but when you have a great love for people and seeing people do well, I really enjoy building and being part of like this high performance team methodology where it's
Mm.
you're trying to do something really hard and you find other people that like to do that and you work really hard together to get that job done. And you don't always hit the mark. Like I don't always hit the number, but we're going to do it with integrity and we are going to give it our all and we're going to be creative. And I think that approach has worked really well in that when your ideal and your foundation's based on like giving to others and making sure that, yeah, at the end of the day, you can't do it alone. Like
Did you call that being a service
the best,
leader or leader of service?
the best I'm going to do is when I get the best people around me
Right,
and
right.
we do things together. And I've had some just tremendously talented people around me at every stop, right? Whether I was an individual contributor, I still had a great manager or a colleague or, or a mentor. And every level along the way has been like that. And some of it has to do with your willingness to be open and humble to feedback. And
Mm.
the higher up the chain of command you go, your ego can get in your way. And it takes somebody that say, hey, you might not be doing this right. And so in the last several years, that's been executive coaches, which I would strongly recommend for anybody kind of moving through that leadership continuum is get somebody that's got a neutral opinion that's going to tell you what it is and what your holes are and reset you because you constantly need reset, right? You constantly need to look at yourself in a really objective way and say, where can I grow? Where
Where
can
are
I
my blind
learn? And
spots? What can I not
I'm
see? Yeah.
very open to that. And I think that's attributed to some of the
Mm.
longevity, building great teams, building great relationships up and down in the organization, and then just having a really authentic belief in helping others and winning and how many people can I impact. And that's the beauty of kind of like moving up. You just get more reach, you
It's
get more.
interesting that the advice you're giving is people first, lead from the front. These things, there's you don't hear the strategy, the tactical things, and that's impressive because I think a lot of times we see leaders that are hyper focused on downstream tactical. Let's make more calls. Let's have more meetings, right? Let's get the account alignment tuned and territory optimization. I know that's a big one for you, and those are all important and it really strategically important things. But in terms of running a successful sales organization year over year, industry to industry, the thing that's been true for you is the people side of it.
Yeah, well said. I completely agree. I think all the strategy and the tactics, you and I could pick a topic and talk about it for 2 hours.
Right.
Territory optimization, right? Hiring, talent development, management, opportunities. How do we develop future managers? Um, you know, compensation planning,
Yeah,
quota.
which you're in the middle of right now. I'm sure
Yeah,
finalizing right
there's
now,
just
right? Yeah.
you name it. How to run a great meeting. How
Mm.
do you run great meetings? How do you put together strategies like that? Training. I love sales training. Professional education. I've kind of taken on in the last couple of years. It's great. I mean, you just learn. I'm constantly looking for these things. So yeah, but at the foundation of it all is the people. It's
So
people.
where does that stem from? We were talking offline a little bit about your earlier days and your time in Tampa and your family moving to Tampa and all that. Dad was a teacher, mom was a dental hygienist. Did that How did that impact or how did they as your parents impact your philosophy and leadership?
I don't know. That's a great question. That I think the one thing as I think back growing up was like nothing came real easy for them. Money wasn't flowing off the out of the trees, so everybody worked hard, right? So
Right.
hard work was instilled really early and we didn't take things for granted. So we really appreciated that and, honoring, I think, the family relationships and the friendships that were built. My parents weren't like wildly social, but the people they were close with, they were really
Very
close
close
with
to.
and they took care of. And we felt it was probably instilled very early just how important family was. And
The
those,
connected tissue that they established with those
yeah, yeah,
relationships. I'm looking for, how do we glean from this? And boom, there it is. As you
yeah.
saw how intimate those relationships were. And it sounds like you replicate that in your setting, despite all of the HR stuff. And, we're in a professional setting and we need to, keep the stuff in a box. It sounds like you're able to get pretty personal with your colleagues and your teammates as well.
Yeah, I think you and I talked about that offline. Was there was a breakthrough for me as a, and maybe for people that are kind of younger managers or new, is I was always taught in these kind of bigger organizations, like keep that barrier between you and the colleague if somebody works for you, or even up. And the
Mm.
reality is like that's the opposite of what you should do. And you want to break those walls down. And if you care about the people, just like think about yourself, when somebody cares about you, you know that's authentic. How much harder do you
Well,
want
I'll
to
run
work?
through a wall for them. Yeah.
And that doesn't mean sometimes you're gonna be forced to make tough decisions with people that you really enjoy because they're just not a good fit for the role they're currently in. But by letting them go, for instance, a termination or putting them on a performance plan, maybe allowing them to move to the spot on the bus that they're going to thrive in.
Mm.
And I didn't understand that a long time ago, but those two things I think have come over time. The 20-year run you're talking about, even longer, is that sometimes by letting somebody transition and helping them on their way, that could free them to be wildly successful in the thing that they want to do or can do better.
Great segue. Great segue. I wanted to ask you about the headlines in terms of layoffs, particularly around the tech space. I spent a lot of time working with technology companies. Folks that are listening to this are probably, a good portion of them are probably with technology companies, and we're seeing massive layoffs in this space. So I want to ask you two questions about this headline, but the first I want to know, you've, I assume, gone through a round of layoffs as a leader in your career. And it's not about the fact that layoffs are happening, that's an effect of our economy and our capitalist society, but it's the way that the layoffs are happening, I think, is coming under pressure. And you talk a lot about, caring about individuals. I mean, what are your thoughts on people being laid off over Slack and emails in the middle of the night and these, horror stories that we're kind of seeing? What's your opinion on all that?
They couldn't be a worse way to let somebody go. I think when I think about any type of layoff or termination, it's as much respect, as much grace that you could provide as you would when you onboard somebody should be given when you offboard somebody. And it doesn't always happen that way. And I don't run a 50,000 person company. So for me to say, Amazon or Google or Facebook, anybody, do they have the ability to personally call each one and set up a Zoom or do a phone call or fly in? Probably not. So I get it. And, they're running publicly traded companies that they're watching that margin. They're watching every bit of the economics very tightly. But I think for anybody that's got the ability to avoid those types of separations, it's important because the way that somebody leaves the company is just as important as the way they come in. And
Well
I
said.
haven't always done it right, and fortunately, haven't done a lot of big layoff. I haven't been forced to do that, but the big one was COVID. We did do furloughs, we did do terminations, and it was awful. It was like the worst
It's the worst
day,
part of the job,
worst day
whether it's
ever.
one, especially when it's mass, like that. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. So we did to some scale that, and it's awful, but do it with grace, do it with
right.
respect, because those people that are transitioning become kind of a microphone, a speaker about their experiences, and
Well, I mean, that now more than ever, Glassdoor and other sites are really amplifying that. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel very bad for the folks that are probably first line managers or maybe having to do that with no warning, or because a
Mhm.
lot of that comes
Yeah,
down from much higher levels. So yeah,
for
it's a
sure.
challenge.
For sure. Yeah. Well, in that, I am curious what your thoughts are on people who are maybe looking at making career changes, right?
Right.
Yeah, because tech, and it's, they're smaller companies too. We see it with smaller organizations that are downsizing and doing these things. So I think we've all been watching the news. We know what's happening with technology. So technology salespeople might be looking at changing industries. And med device is a $500 billion current market currently, roughly. It's slated for $700 billion by 2029, according to the research I did. What would be your recommendations to someone who maybe has been in tech sales and wants to get into med device? And is that even realistic?
So talent always finds a way to win. I believe in that wholeheartedly. So somebody that's very talented and has professional selling skills, I believe could make a transition to any industry they want. However, there are nuances to med device, which you alluded to earlier in the discussion, like being in the OR, for instance. If you are fortunate enough to get an opportunity that a company that makes products that actually surgeons use in the operating room, you got to have a different skill set for that. You can't go from, selling a SaaS product to that without a significant amount of training. And I would recommend for somebody that's interested is, one, find somebody, in your network that that's doing the job you want to do or kind of close. Go do a field ride with them. Go, sit down, take them for coffee, learn about what is the true day to day, because it might be different than what you perceive it to be. It's not always sexy, glamorous, and not everybody's making multiple six-figure incomes.
Not everybody's killing it like John DeLeon. Hit John
Exactly.
for that right along.
Right. So do that. One, two, there's probably going to be an intermediary step. So if you are doing tech right now and you inevitably want to get to med device, what's in between there? There's a lot of medical sales that aren't directly in the OR. They probably look a little bit more like what you currently do from a day to day, but it gets your foot into that
Med
medical
tech, maybe.
sales. Yeah. Medical sales space. Biotech could be any number of things, DME products, things that even software, medical software, things like that, that just get you into healthcare. And then that next transition could be there. There's also, you alluded to distributor partners, right? Distributor partners a lot of times have associate roles and other roles that they want to fill that it might be easier to break into than a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar med tech company that's looking for a very specific experience level that you're not going to have at this point. But I believe at the end of the day, talent will win, and great, highly talented people that did really well in tech could do it in med device for sure. But there might be a couple steps you're gonna have to get.
Take a step back to take two steps forward potentially.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we know of account executives and SDRs as a common SaaS model. So if you're an account executive, you might be equivalent, see this as the equal of taking a step into an SDR role, that associate role, where you may not be SDR work necessarily. Maybe there's some components of that, but the gist of it is it's probably equal in terms of the totem, the hierarchy in the organization. So you might take a step back, get to that entry level position, but talent will always win, and that will be identified, and you'll be able to move your career up. And you look, I know you're dealing with not all of your surgeries, and the demand in your business is like reactive to medical emergencies. And I know there is a component of that, but there's also an elective part of it. So I would go almost as far as saying healthcare is recession proof, being that we're looking at a potential recession now, but so there's some diciness there. It's not completely recession proof, but it is a safe place to be, and there's a lot of earning potential. And you've been in healthcare for quite some time, so obviously it's done well for you.
Yeah, no, well said. And there's a vast amount of opportunities out there in the space and related spaces. And I think there's some stuff that tech people do that transfers really, really well. And just that hunt, that ability to get out, and the volume of opportunities you need to create in that space, that's important, because there are reps, I think, in med tech that have been around for a while that they lose the hunt because they develop a customer base, and you're not really hunting anymore. You're servicing. Servicing is different. So if you find companies, and this will be the last, I guess, comment on that. If you're looking to transfer those skills over, look for companies that want hunters and want people that want to go out and build the market, not maintain the market. Right.
Great point. Yeah, there's that transfer. There are some transferable skill sets that definitely move over.
Yes.
And I'd also add the complexity aspect. In tech, often we're having to take very complex concepts, distill it down, and communicate it in simple fashion. And we're often dealing with people who are specialists in their field, product engineers, cybersecurity analysts. Like these are uber smart people in their field, as are neurosurgeons and orthopedic surgeons and these folks, right? So you're used to dealing with that. You're used to, communicating complex terms. So there's hope. There's an opportunity. Now, look, tech isn't going to turn into a desert, right? It's not going to go into a ghost town, but there is definitely going to be some shrinkage and some tightening of the belt. So if you are thinking about making that jump, make sure you consider what Jeremy's saying here. Now, I want to talk about your book. I'm going to transition. You wrote a awesome book that I personally am a big fan of, because I'm a big basketball guy myself. Go Dubs. Golden State Warriors, that is.
Yeah.
You were a point guard in college, and obviously basketball is your game. Normally people would say, hey, so tell me about the book. But before we do that, I want to read a passage to tee that up, and then you can tell us a little bit about it. So let's see here. This is about communicating on defense. So communication. Former NBA point guard and championship coach Doc Rivers stated, if you're not talking, you're not playing defense. Great point guards are strong communicators. They call the plays, they provide direction to teammates, and in many instances are guarding the ball more than anyone else on defense, because they have to cover the other primary ball handler. What does that mean? And how do you correlate that to business?
Communication. It's funny. I watched the Sixers play last night.
Oh, perfect.
Doc Rivers is the coach. I'm a big fan. He's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Communication is so important in business, especially if you're on a team. Everybody's on a team to some extent, unless you're just a solo practitioner. But even if you are, you're communicating to somebody, right? So effective communication is everything. And especially in our line of work, whether you're tech sales, medical sales, I don't care what it is, your ability to articulate, listen, communicate, and interact in a very positive way to move things forward is vital. So, I mean, as it relates specifically to the point guard, in my mind is, is kind of the catalyst on offense. So if they're not communicating both through signals with the coach and then becoming that kind of conduit to the team, you don't see many teams that are very successful unless that's happening. I mean, most championship teams, right, have that. It's the same thing in business. Like, they have a great leader that's communicating. There's transparency. People are listening. There's this two-way, hey, this is what we're trying to accomplish. There's feedback. All right, let's iterate. And then we go and we execute, right? So communication is critical.
Yeah, I love the aspect of it being a defense guy, communicating on defense specifically. When you think about being in the market and, defending your territory, right? We need to be communicating as a team, product, marketing, sales, you name it. We all have to be dialoguing really well. And I think that's a secret you talked about with your success, is how you're able to build those cross-functional relationships and keep those channels of communication going, getting those feedback loops involved. And you being on the front line, leading from the front, I'm sure you're able to pick up directly what the surgeons are saying, what their challenges are with the procedure, the instrumentation, and being able to take that directly back to your product teams that are doing the development.
Yeah, if a couple of weeks goes by and I don't get out in the field and see a customer or get on a sales call, with a prospect, it's too long. You need to keep that sword very sharp, and it's really important because you can tend to be in the boardroom or on these calls, planning cycles, and the farther you go from that, the more disconnected you get. And there is something to whisper down the lane. Like, if you're only hearing from your management team and they're only hearing from the reps, and the reps are, it's lost in translation. So sometimes, I attribute maybe some of that longevity to always focusing on listening to the customer directly, getting those direct touches, trying the things that we're telling everybody else to do, myself,
right?
Giving that, that new messaging a whirl, or that new sales aid, or the iPad, or whatever tools.
Updating your CRM.
Updating, making notes in the CRM, like whatever those things are, like do it, try it. I don't have to do it every day.
Right.
It's like case coverage. I don't go into the OR that much. I still go because I love being in the OR, but I'm not the guy that's going to go cover the case the best. But it's good to know, what does that look like? What's going on in the OR? We're recommending this. Am I seeing that? And how do we make it easier, better for the rep? So yeah. that's a big part of leading from the front.
Another question that's an analogy. What's the equivalent to looking at the ball while you're dribbling in business, right? As a point guard, you got to keep your head up. You got to have the vision,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And you got to look at the peripherals and see the court. So how would you equate that analogy to business? What would be the equivalent of looking at the ball while I'm dribbling?
You're with your customer, you're very happy about the business you've established, and you are not getting your head up to look around. Who's the referral they could give you? Who's the customer you just drove by on the way, or the prospect on the
The
way
other
to the
three
customer?
surgeons in that surgery group that they're a part of.
Yeah, and are you getting complacent by just, hey, all good? I'm and by the way, like customer service and serving your customers, huge. So not that, but what are you missing along the way with your head down, staring at that commission check you just earned, versus thinking about how do I double that commission check? How do I add more value to more customers? How do I create more scale? Am I planning? Do I have contingencies for when things don't go right? Because they do. Something's going to go
Yeah,
wrong.
you're not going to bat 1,000 deals, or bat at a wrong sport, but you're
Hey, I
not going to
know.
close everything.
Get your head up and look around the market. And that goes back to the other point of protecting your business. You have to be aware of what's going on in the marketplace, because there's competitors coming. If you've established anything of value, somebody's coming behind you to try and take it.
Word.
Get your head up.
Get your head up.
Head up,
Get
man.
your head out. Get your head up. So a surgeon actually inspired you to write this book. A surgeon in Houston who was doing a lot of blogging. I guess he wrote a couple books himself in a relatively quick period. And you saw that, hey, he's a super busy surgeon doing a lot of different things, and he's able to still create this content. What am I doing? I got to do the same thing. So talk to me about your why behind the book, and your brand building in general. Why did you write the book? What does it mean for you? What is it intended for? And anybody can read the book and take the lessons from it, which are great. And I encourage everybody to go out and grab the point guard approach. But I want to get to your purpose behind building a personal brand, writing the book, and then if you can just layer into us, what's next?
Yeah. So the why, at first was I just wanted the challenge to do it, because I was
Mm,
like, I'm not a novel writer. I haven't been trained as a writer. Can I do it? So it was more of just self growth and the challenge, and then yeah, Dr. Kotler telling me about this, like he wrote 2 books in whatever 180 days. I was just blown away. I was always intrigued by it, and then it just became, okay, now I'm going to try it. And I don't have the time. I don't have the expertise. I'm frankly not that talented to write anything, probably, but
so that's
let's
a
just,
story you were telling yourself, but you
yeah,
overcame
yeah.
that somehow, it sounds
And
like.
it was like, well, let's go get it. And
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
competitive side of me. That was the
That's what I was going to say. That's why I was smiling, because it sounded like you were being a
yeah,
little competitive. They're like, man, I can do that too.
I can do it. And it's like no harm, no foul. It's the
Right.
worst thing
What
that
are you
can
going to
happen.
lose?
I can put some things down on paper that and inevitably the why after that was, how do I share some of this stuff that I really believe in, and could
Right.
it help 2 people or 2 million people, somewhere in between? It doesn't matter. But if it could help somebody else, that's pretty cool. And I think I have something interesting to share. So that was kind of the why. And then beyond that, and we talked about this a little bit offline with the brand, I don't think about it as much about brand as I think about it scale. As
Mm,
LinkedIn and some of these other social media platforms have allowed us to now reach more people quickly. You don't have to be a movie star or a
right.
star athlete to do it. And I think it's awesome in one way, in that you can share and learn so quickly from others that are doing things that you want to do, and you can help others that want to do what you're doing already, or they see that in their future. And I think the brand, to me, is a vehicle of scale. And if I can reach more people in a way that I want to and share, it opens up opportunities. It creates more positive impact for others. And it's to me, that's probably more important than any kind of, like, Jeremy Laynor brand, or trying to make some contract somewhere, or some sort of earning potential thing. It's more about impact. And
So
then
this isn't about speaking engagements. This isn't
no,
about
not,
how many books can I sell this month.
right. No, nothing to do with that.
You're not going to really quit your job because you wrote a book. I think you said in one of your podcasts.
Yeah, absolutely not. And in fact, if another book is in the future, it'll be organic. And I've got ideas, and I maybe want to do it because that's another challenge. And I learned a lot about the ups and downs of writing a book, and I want to speed it up, and I want to add more value to more people. So the future is it's about scale and more giving, and how else can I find ways to impact more people in a positive way.
The sports analogies with sales come under a lot of heat. You don't have to scroll long on LinkedIn for someone to kind of post on their eye roll around sports analogies or metaphors as they relate to sales, and how maybe it promotes the bro culture and whatnot. But I think what I want to say about this is that it doesn't really matter about the discipline so much. That just happened to be what you lived and how you saw the world and how you were able to impact lives. And like myself, I've read this book, and if you see my copy of it, if you're watching, like I have this thing highlighted and notes in the columns, not just because I'm interviewing the author, but this is how I read my books. I study them. I don't just read them. But let's talk about another discipline that you could potentially write a book about as well, maybe the surgeon approach, right? Because the discipline still remains around the level of intensity, the vision, the flexibility. A lot of these principles, regardless of the discipline, still apply, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that was the whole point of the book, that was my level of expertise. Like, I've done this thing I do now for 20 years, but I've been around basketball since I was like 6 years old. So I was like, those things marry up, but all the principles are completely objective. You could apply it to anything. You don't have to know anything about basketball to appreciate the
Exactly.
principles or apply some of them. And that was the whole concept too. It wasn't like, take this and now you're going to be wildly successful. It's like, take a chunk of this, and maybe next week you're going to do something different than you did last week, and it's going to get you a great outcome and a thought process moreover. And we get to work with these surgeons, neurosurgeons, orthopedic surgeons who are just so disciplined and have done all this training to get to this point in their career where they can directly help patients' lives, which is so cool. Like, but it takes a number of amazing qualities, right, to do that. So absolutely, the surgeon approach makes total sense. And all these principles like resilience. And what does that have to do with basketball? Yeah, you have to be resilient, but I'll tell you what, there's a lot of, you could be somebody, in the military, you could be, an attorney,
Musician,
a musician, yeah,
a
any,
lawyer, you name it. If it's a discipline of any type that requires practice and concentration and the whole laws of mastery, then all of these principles directly apply, I think.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I just happened to bite into it and appreciate it because, again, I didn't play point when I played ball. I was more of a 2 or 3 guard, so I was striking off the side. You're feeding me to get your assists, right? But
that's it.
yeah, so let's we're gonna wrap here in a minute, but I want to break down an important part of the book and hear your thoughts. So for our listeners, there is prepare for the apex moment is a section in your book. Prepare for the apex moment. So if we think about sales, it's that first discovery call meeting. Maybe it's when you're delivering the proposal, and maybe in basketball it's that moment when you get to pull up for the shot, or the alley-oop is sent your way. Are you going to be able to finish? These things. It's that moment of impact, the apex moment. And when you talk about being prepared for that apex moment, what you're talking about is practice a lot. And through the book, you mentioned practice in several different sections. I almost wanted to count how many times you mentioned practice, because this is an important topic in the sales arena. And as I go from company to company, working on SDR teams, I don't see a lot of practicing. So I'm curious how you've operationalized practicing within your organization, how important it is that your team get those reps, and what do they practice on even?
Yeah, it's so important. And it's amazing that in professional sales, there's this kind of lack of focus on that really important part of getting better and being a professional salesperson. Because if you talk to a professional fill in the blank, let's baseball, they don't just go out and play the games. I mean, they are just working on their every aspect of that game all the time. And I mentioned Michael Jordan and he gets thrown around a lot, but he's just doing the basic fundamentals. Kobe, all the greats, like they always go back to the fundamentals, and they're the ones in the gym before everybody else. But there's a lot of other players that are doing that as well. But what separates the really, really great players is their level of intensity when they're doing those fundamentals is different.
Right.
And how we've operationalized at Providence, and I think it's a work in progress, is that like role playing is a big part of our training. When you first get hired and you come to our new hire training class, you're going to be role playing a lot. When you are with us for 4 years and you go to a national sales meeting, you're going to be role playing a lot. If you go to a mid-year, regional area get together, meeting, whatever, you're going to be role playing a lot. And one of the things we talk about is in the feedback actually from our most recent global sales meeting was like, they wish they had more time to role play. So culturally,
Crazy.
it's kind of a nice shift. Is like, instead of, oh crap, we got to role play, people want more reps, more time. So we're talking about how do we set up a call like this? Because you and I could role play right now. I could
We
say,
could.
Derek, okay, you're an orthopedic spine surgeon. I've met with you once. Let's go. And we can role play. And we've asked our reps to do that with their managers, with each
Each
other.
other.
You can do that anytime. You can do it with your spouse. You can do it with your kid. Everybody likes to have fun, and role playing could be 30 seconds, could be 5 minutes, could be a half an hour. So it doesn't have to be this arduous formal thing. But with modern technology, we had our reps actually holding their cell phone. I don't know if you can see this. Like, so if I'm the doctor and you're calling on me, we would have this so you could see what your sales call looks like from the view of the customer.
Put yourself in the customer's eyes.
Super,
So we
super
have
cool,
voice
right?
of the customer, now eyes of the customer.
Yeah,
Huh?
that was one of our manager, Alessandro. Alessandro.
Yeah.
It was one of his ideas. Like, that's great. So you just hold the cell phone, videotape the role play, and then give it. And they're like, this is what you look like when you're pitching.
But how do you practice at full speed? I know you talked in the book about intense role plays, check, but practicing at game speed, quote unquote, is also in the book. So how would a med device person practice at full speed? Role play, with your internal folks is a version, I guess, but are they practicing on their prospects? Are they practicing on surgeons? When that could be, I mean, you wouldn't want to practice on your good ones, right?
Correct. Yeah. So one of the things we talked about is the total office call. So like when you go in our business, you may be calling on a whole practice. You don't just go meet, the surgeon doesn't meet you at Applebee's every time you're having a meeting, right? Most of the time it's in their clinic. Well, who do you run into in the clinic? You got the gatekeeper, practice. You got the MA, the medical assistant, practice. You got the physician assistant, practice.
So you're saying launch into your
Pitch
spiel.
everybody.
Yeah, pitch everybody. There you go.
Everybody. Why
Yeah.
wouldn't you?
Take
And then
more
when you're in a
shots, man. Yeah.
hospital, you got all these other stakeholders. You've got, you name it, but perioperative services, a neuro coordinator, ortho coordinators,
The value
historical.
folks, you get procurement and
Hey,
those guys you got to talk to. Right.
anybody is worthy of getting educated. And that's a nice thing about our technology. Is like everybody's got a spine.
Mm.
Everybody's got a cervical spine, everybody's got a lumbar spine, and they know somebody that's got back pain because it's the number 2 reason that you go to the doctor's office. It's common cold and back pain.
Mm.
Everybody knows about spine. So talk about it, pitch, talk about, and you can titrate the level of clinical and technical jargon you use based on the audience you're with. But that's also good too. How do you change your messaging? How do you adapt to the person in front of you to make it valuable for them? Because that's what it's about. It's not what I think's valuable. It's like what's valuable to the person right in front of me. That's what I want to pitch. That to me is kind of, I guess, that level of game speed practice, because they're potential patients, they're referrers, they're key stakeholders in the continuum, right?
And they're going to move jobs at some point, and they're going to remember you and take you along that way. I love how you have both practicing on the clinical side with, getting the reps certified on how to perform these procedures. And then on the sort of craft side, the sales craft, you're doing the role plays, full speed and these other things. So you have both sort of areas covered relatively well. And I imagine while you're doing your OR certification, this is a good time to talk to the surgeon about X, and this is a good time to ask him about Y. And so now you're incorporating the both function and domain and craft. But in terms of practicing, we're turning 30 here, heading home, wrong sport. how do you get better as a sales leader?
That one, again, I referenced the executive coaches,
Okay.
depending
So
on what.
you have an executive coach. I've had an executive coach.
Yeah, we've had, I've been really fortunate to have some great executive coaches along the last couple of experiences I've been at, and they're so valuable. Also, I think having a mentor, non-paid mentor, or a network of mentors. So there's people that I've stayed in touch with that are at other organizations leading sales, leading the company, marketing, you name it. Um, Having that network available to bounce ideas off, be vulnerable, talk about situations, I think is a great opportunity as a sales leader to learn. Listen, there's tons of forums now available for free. You can find them on LinkedIn, you can find them online. Um, the networking, within wherever you live, but also just the digital reach we have now. There's a lot available. Books, huge fan of books, obviously. And you got to push yourself. My goal right now is I really like Audible because I can do a lot of things while I'm listening.
Totally.
Working out's always been a big, I don't know, maybe as an athlete, but like starting my day with some form of exercise, and I've got a book in my ear. Great. Like I'm listening to an awesome book, $1 Trillion Coach.
Okay. Thanks for the plug. Okay.
Super, super cool book right now. And then I'm reading a book. So I always have one in the ear and then one at night that
so
I'm
you don't
reading.
combine the two modes. You have two different books. Okay.
Yeah, because I'm not a fast reader. So
Neither am I.
so I've got an Audible. So if I can do that once a month, each of those, I got 24 books in a year. For me, that's pretty good.
Leaders are readers, right? Or readers are leaders.
Readers are leaders.
There
Yeah.
we go. So there's a
Yeah.
saying.
So that's been really good. And then in terms of like sharpening, keeping that blade sharp, um, I think back at some of the different ways that, there's certain companies provide leadership development courses, and then others maybe just aren't at that point yet. And I think you as the individual, it's your responsibility to seek out those opportunities. And there's people that will give you direction, but you got to put the work in to do it.
Yeah, well, we do a really good job in business of developing our frontline individual contributors. And it seems like when it gets to the management level, you were mentioning this earlier, less pats on the back and these sorts of things as you move up in but so it sounds like as you move up in your career in a leadership track specifically, it becomes more on you, self-accountable to sharpen that sword, because not every organization, to your point, has a program that's focused on that. And if you think about the sales training team or the sales enablement organization, 90, if not 100% of their content is concentrated on the frontline individual contributors that I see often. Yep. So it's important that we own our development as leaders as we move up. That's an important
Sometimes
call out.
that stop at a Medtronic or at a fast growing organization that's got the funding, they are typically funding leadership development because they need it. Yeah. They're going from 20 reps to 100, and so you start to build these layers in, and that's where I was able to really receive some great management training, was in those kind of runs where you're growing fast and they're expanding, and now they need to develop the middle manager, and that's those are good opportunities to think about for up and coming leaders.
Career changing opportunities, it sounds like. Well, this has been phenomenal. I know you have a busy day ahead of you. It's we're recording here at the end of January, so trying to transition from last year to 2023, close the books, open the new year. You got your hands full. So tell people where they can find you and where they can find the book.
Yeah, I think LinkedIn's a great spot. Jeremy Laynor, easily connect easily. Point Guard Approach is available on all the areas. There's my dog.
It's all good.
Timing's perfect, right?
Mine's been at the door. I don't know if anybody's
Amazon's an easy stop to get it. Also, the publisher, you can find it on their website as well, which is Olympia Publishers.
Olympia Publishers. Yep.
So any of those spots, but if anybody in the audience wants to connect, LinkedIn's a great spot.